I am joined by Robert Griffin III, James White, Field Yates Meanakeims.
All right, so first play we're going to look at 2nd and 2, one of the Patriots' first offensive plays.
What's going on, everyone? Tayler Kyles here for CLNS Media, coming at you with another episode of Pat's Daily, brought to you by our good friends at Prize Picks and Game Time. Today, I am back in the host chair, first time in a while. And for the first time in a while, beside me is Alex Barth to talk some college football. We got Senior Bowl practices next week, as well as the actual Senior Bowl game. But as we all know, the practices are what matter most. I will be down there. Amit Bhattacharjee, our producer, will be down there. We'll be giving you a lot of good content, some firsthand looks at what's going on. But to get ready, I've been releasing some Senior Bowl previews for players at the most glaring positions of need for the Patriots. You can go check them out on CLNS Media. I've got little quick profiles on all of those guys to get you caught up. But the purpose of today's episode is to dive into the guys that we're going to be looking for, players to watch, but specifically from a Patriots perspective. So not going to be a whole lot of 5'8" receivers on this list. Xavier Restrepo may slide in there, but for that point, we're going to be trying to look at scheme fits based on what we know about the Patriots so far. Also going to start off with some news that has broken today. Very busy day in Patriots land, even though it's a Friday. But before we dive into it, Alex, buddy, welcome back to the pod. Feels good to be doing college content with you again. How you doing, pal?
Yeah, this is good. I mean, it's not even that much college football content anymore in this sense, right? We're talking about these guys as NFL players. We've kind of hit that turn. We've hit that corner as we really get going here in the pre-draft process.
Yes, sir. So not a lot of actual ball to talk about, but obviously with the games coming up and even some movement on the coaching staff, some like college football adjacent news. So first, let's dive into some of the current event news. First and foremost, we got to talk about Jabril Peppers. He was acquitted. I'm trying to pull up the tweet right now just to make sure I phrase this properly because this is a legal situation. But Patriots player Jabril Peppers was acquitted on all charges in a domestic violence / assault trial that's gone on the last 2 days. Of course, he was placed on the commissioner's exempt list when this first came up about mid-season and didn't play for the Patriots for a while. Did return to the team later in the season. It was reported that he spoke to Robert Kraft. He spoke to Gerard Mayo. Lost his captaincy. That was a mutual decision. But the feeling was that if he was allowed back on the team with Robert Kraft's zero tolerance policy for domestic violence, there was probably some chance that I think we were hearing whispers of he had actually recorded the incident. So probably got Kraft's okay to return to the team. But he did plead guilty to being in possession of cocaine. So not fully out of the woods, but obviously the one that really worried you, he has been acquitted of. So I'm curious, do you think, Alex, there's any chance he ends up getting put on any kind of list, a suspension or something because of the cocaine, because that is significant? Or do you think the exempt list was probably enough?
Yeah, look, it's always, each of these situations are unique. You never know, especially with this league and the way they handle these things. I think because he was on the exempt list, my guess that would be essentially his punishment, right? He missed all that time. Does he maybe get a slap on the wrist, a fine, something like that? I could see it. I'm not going to say he won't be suspended, but he's already missed. He missed, 10 games, 12 games, something like that when he was on the exempt list. So I think that's more than he would have missed. It's significantly more than he would have missed, more than the average player would miss for a drug charge.
I'd agree. And then just looking at this from a Patriots perspective, it's a little more encouraging going into next season because your two top safeties, Kyle Duggar and Jabril Peppers, missed so much time for different reasons. Andrew Callahan did a great job over at the Boston Herald writing up a story about Kyle Duggar, how he suffered injury in week 4. He tried to block a field goal, landed on his leg with all of his weight, and then it just got progressively worse as he continued to play on it, even though he did miss some time. So he's going to have to get surgery, so he's going to be on the mend. But Jabril Peppers also banged up. He ended the season hurt, but at least you now know that he's probably going to be on the team. We'll see what the health status is going to be, but not going to dredge on with that one too long. We're going to move on to the coaching staff. A whole lot of movement in like the past 24 hours, less actually. So going to go down the list. First in, we've got quarterbacks coach Ashton Grant. He's coming over from Cleveland where he spent the past 5 years. So going to get a little bit of familiarity, right? He's worked with Alex Van Pelt before, obviously worked with Kevin Stefanski, so he's going to understand a bit of what Drake May was taught as a rookie under Van Pelt, under T.C. McCartney. Also, Ashton Grant interviewed for the quarterbacks coach job at Green Bay this offseason, so that's one very big addition. Another addition potentially to the quarterback room, Riley Larkin, who is an offensive assistant at the Oklahoma State University. He also worked with quarterbacks.
Ohio State.
I'm sorry. What did I say?
Oklahoma.
Oh, Ohio State. Jeez Louise. Too many of these O states.
Two very different quarterback situations there. I don't know.
Very,
that
very
quarterbacks
different.
coach from Oklahoma State right now.
Yeah, no, they got Will Howard. He coached Will Howard, the good one.
Yeah.
Will Howard also thanked him after they won the national championship game. One of the guys he credited for his success. So also a John Carroll alumni, played quarterback there. Julian Edelman asked on Games with Names when he was sitting down with Josh McDaniels last year, what's in the water at that school? Because like Nick Caserio came from there. Nick Caley came from there. Obviously, Josh came from there. And apparently how that works is that Josh was recommended by, I think it was Brian Daboll. Then Josh was asked once he got to the team by Bill, hey, are there any guys you'd recommend? And then it became this kind of circle of trust where the John Carroll guys were like, hey, don't screw this up because these are recommendations. They matter. So clearly Riley Larkin, a guy who clearly was valued by Ohio State coming over to the Patriots, that should be a very interesting connection. And Ohio State, another Ohio guy, McDaniels and Vrabel, both Ohio guys themselves. Also in Clinton McMillan, defensive assistant. He, for the past few years, has been Tennessee's assistant defensive line coach and pass rush specialist. So maybe we end up hearing that he has a different actual title, but with Terrell Williams being the defensive line coach, you'd assume that McMillan, who there's some videos online, you can actually see them like repping things together, will continue to do that and then kind of get a Joe Kim replacement as well. Out is TC McCartney. As I just said, there's a whole lot of movement in the quarterback room. And with Alex Van Pelt not returning to the team, it makes sense that TC McCartney is out. But great job, TC, getting Drake May ready to play last year. Those guys did a really phenomenal job. And the very last bit of coaching news, or really staff news, John Stretch Stryker has been named officially the Vice President of Football Operations and Strategy. So, as I said, whole lot of football news there on the coaching staff, on the regular staff. But what are their biggest takeaways from everybody named? You got Grant, you got Larkin, McMillan, McCartney, and then, of course, Stretch getting an official title.
Yeah, I just think on the offensive side of the ball, you have all these guys coming in from all these different backgrounds. And when Josh McDaniels was hired, and look, there's still room. They still need a wide receivers coach. They still need an offensive line coach. They still need a tight end coach, right? And those are big ones. So there's still room for some of those familiar names to come back. But we all went right back to the database and people we knew, and we thought McDaniels was going to get the band back together. Instead, it's Ashton Grant coming from Cleveland, Tony Dews coming from Tennessee. I want to say Riley Leonard. That's not the quarterback. It's Riley
Larkin.
Riley Larkin. He comes from that Ohio State tree, which is completely different, but definitely a good offense to tap into. So
Chip Kelly, those you're getting some of those roots. That's really exciting.
So you have Ashton Grant, who comes from the background of the offense Drake May ran last year. You have Tony Dews, who comes from the background of the offense that Mike Vrabel ran in Tennessee. And then McDaniels really means what he says, talking up this time he spent with college programs in the last year, learning more about some of the newer philosophies offensively and things like that. You have a guy in Larkin who's definitely been involved in that at Ohio State. So there really isn't, like last year we knew, right? They hired Van Pelt, they hired McCartney, all these guys they hired outside of Tyler Hughes. It was all Cleveland guys, it was all West Coast, it was all that same Stefanski system. You can't really play that game this year, at least not yet. Maybe the other pieces we start to see more of a trend, but it's all different people coming from different backgrounds, which give it like, if it was last year like this, it would have worried me because it was a bunch of first-time people, all with different backgrounds. Getting everybody on the same page is going to be a pain in the ass. Because Josh McDaniels has the experience that he has, and he pretty much knows what kind of show he wants to run. Now you get these other people who can give these unique inputs, and I think McDaniels is going to do a very good job. Essentially, he's a funnel, putting that all together and outputting that into one cohesive plan. I do like the direction they've gone so far. Basically, all the people who are upset about not getting a tight pants coach, it's funny. They're surrounding McDaniels with what are viewed as a bunch of tight pants kind of coaches. Yeah. So there's definitely going to be that influence in the room. Maybe not as big as some people wanted, but there's definitely going to be that influence in the room.
And when Josh McDaniels was hired, we were kind of hoping, all right, if you're going to potentially have your OC who's locked in potentially forever, and one thing I know Andrew Callahan, guy's been doing a really great job, but he was speaking to Jeff Howe yesterday or a couple of days ago, and Jeff mentioned how Josh McDaniels, after what's happened in his past stops, really New England is home for him, and it gets to a point where you kind of do want to stay in place, because I saw there was some speculation of, is Josh really going to be that guy? It sounds like he probably is, at least for the foreseeable future. So then you're hoping, all right, Now you get some young guys in the system, right? So you're getting fresh perspectives consistently. So that's not just Josh, it's Josh also hearing from people in different programs and innovative systems. It feels like that's what you're getting here, where you get the guy, like we mentioned earlier, who's got the experience with Drake May, that offense, Kevin Stefanski, one of the better offensive coaches in the league, or offensive-minded coaches in the league. And then you get Ohio State. Everybody wants a piece of Chip Kelly right now. So that's very, very exciting. And Josh, I know there was a story that just came out where Mike Vrabel, I believe it was WBZ, was talking about, why he hired each of his coordinators. And once again, he mentioned McDaniels having used this past season to try to learn and, advance his system. And that was one part of the interview process. So, yeah, I'll say that's the final thing on that. It is very exciting that they're getting different guys in the room. Also with McMillan, I like that they're getting someone with Terrell Williams. Clearly, they have a track record of success in Tennessee, so kind of getting the band back together over there. But done with that, let's talk about some college football players. Senior Bowl week. Next week, going to have a lot of practices. That's going to be a lot of fun. Going to get to talk to players, see a lot of one-on-one matchups. Before we get into the actual position previews, though, is there any position that you're most excited to be watching, period? Like one group that's just loaded with talent, or guys where maybe you just have a lot of questions that you're hoping this bowl game answers?
Well, I mean, the line's always fun with the Senior Bowl. Offensive and defensive line, that's always kind of the best thing to watch. And especially with the tackles this year, there's so many people that want that blue chip player, the guy whose jersey they can buy at the top of the draft. By the way, normalize buying offensive linemen's jerseys, first of all,
Yes.
But since we're not there yet, everybody's trying to figure out, well, if it's Carter at 4 and this and that, and then trying to wedge that tackle in there somewhere else. So you and I are happy when we look at their mock drafts. Look, it's not entirely unrealistic, but you got to know what you're talking about with those tackles later in the draft. And right now there's kind of a bunch of guys all bunched together, all grouped together, and in that same tier, and how they're going to separate. And that's what events like this are good for. So guys like Josh Connerly, guys like Ariante Ursary, Mabo from Purdue. I know I think, Marcus Mabo, who I think you were talking about the other day, like learning more about these guys will be very helpful as you kind of try to figure out what the plan is there.
100%. So we're not actually going to start with the trenches, because this is going to be a very trench heavy show. First, we're going to give you a teaspoonful of sugar to make the medicine go down easy. Let's start with some wide receiver talk. So Alex, who are some receiver names that you are specifically going to be looking out for, and why?
So I know that there's a couple big names that people are focused on, right? I've already seen Jalen Royals in the comments. I know your guy's Pat Bryant. So I'll go kind of a little off the rip here. I'll give you a couple. One that's definitely a fit, and one that I'm worried is absolutely not a fit, but I'm still curious about. Xavier Restrepo. Absolutely. Yeah. Josh McDaniels. Look, I really like Pop Douglas. I think he's a good player. He's not the kind of player that's going to be a primary slot in Josh McDaniels' offense. He's just proven he's not that kind of volume guy. Restrepo, I think, can be. He's not the biggest guy, but he's a little bigger, and we saw him take some big hits at Miami, and he handled it well. Tough receiver, reliable receiver, explosive, good after the catch. He profiles like a Patriot. So he's going to be a guy I think you're looking for to have a big week. And then the one that might not be a fit, but I'm fascinated by. So I think some of the criticism of Josh McDaniels is overblown. One thing with him that does worry me, he's never been good with scheme touch players that can kind of figure out creative ways to get the ball in the hands. Case in point, evidence number one, Jonnu Smith. You look at the way he struggled in New England and the success he's had since, with his usage being different. So I'm nervous talking about scheme touch players. But if there's one scheme touch player McDaniels figured out, at least in his second stint, it was Cordarrelle Patterson. And figuring out how to use him as a running back and use him as a slot receiver and get kind of gadgety with him, that worked. I don't know that he fully tapped into Patterson's potential the way the Falcons and Steelers did, but he was able to get more out of Cordarrelle Patterson than I think you realistically expected. So that brings us to Savion Williams from TCU. 6'5", 20, not just fast, but he's quick. He moves well. He can change direction, especially for a guy his size. It's all very cool. But he's not exactly a polished wide receiver. And he spent half this year playing running back. So he's not a guy like he's built like
an injury?
No, he just did it.
Okay. God, talk about Cordarrelle Patterson.
Right. No, yeah. This is exactly where I'm going. So if you just look at him, you think, all right, that's an X receiver. But he's not, because he's not refined enough to do that. but he's so athletic. He's so physically dominant. It's like, how do we get this guy involved? You're not going to have a 6'5", 220-pound running back full time.
Yep.
That's just not going to work. But finding creative, like, I'm just interested to see kind of what he does. Does he work with the running backs? What kind of routes is he running? And like, I'm really nervous about giving him to Josh McDaniels, but I like the player so much that there's a part of me that's just like, Cordero Patterson 2.0, Cordero Patterson 2.0, Cordero Patterson 2.0. So I have no expectations for Savion Williams. I'm just fascinated to see what happens with him on the field and throughout this process.
I will slightly push back on the. I feel like I'm the only one who is of this opinion with Jonnu, but I just feel like that here there were so many like fine players that did deserve touches, and he was so inconsistent. Like watching him catch the ball was tough.
Well, there were other guys too. Like
it looks awkward. It takes him a while to like get his footing, and it felt like Hunter's better. It was so obvious that Hunter was better. Then you also had Jacoby, you had Kendrick, and then Nelson Aguilar was just on the field to be the X. So I remember being like, I want more Jonnu, and then I studied it and was just like, I don't know how you do anymore. He just is really weird. But anyway, that said, if it's a Cordero Patterson once again, that would be really cool. And then hopefully you pray that down the line he can develop and turn into more of a consistent, well-rounded receiver. Where do you think he ends up going, actually? Because physical freak, but such a projection. That feels like maybe mid-late day 2, third round. What are you thinking?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, there's a lot of variance there because different teams are going to view him different ways. Like
True.
you're going to have teams that not just like, oh, we think he's the 50th best player, we think he's the 70th. There's going to be teams that view him almost think kind of like Travis Hunter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where, all right, well, we think he's primarily a receiver. We're going to mix him in as a little bit of running back, or we're going to try to turn him into a tight end and have him return kicks, or, we're going to have him do this or that. It's going to be so all over the place. I don't think he gets outside of the top 100 just because of that athleticism. My guess would be like his ceiling is probably he maybe sneaks into the top 40. But my guess is he's going somewhere, and that's if he has a great process. My guess is he's going somewhere probably late second, early third round, like you said.
Yep. So over here, I'm going one. I gotta talk Pat Bryant. I have to, because he was the first draft crush I had this season. As soon as I kind of stumbled on him, because I was looking over stats and I was trying to find who could get the most deep production, because it felt like T. Higgins, they may not be able to get him, and there aren't a lot of other guys that you think could be long-term answers for you, and you might not pick 10 in the draft or early on. So where can you find those guys? I saw Pat Bryant. Like, his numbers were very good on deep targets. Looked at the highlight tape first just to get an idea of the game, and I was like, oh my God, for somebody I've never heard of and who people really aren't talking about very much, this kid's impressive. Like, he's got the size. He's the real X receiver, which this offense hadn't had in so long. He doesn't have great vertical speed, which is where some of the deep stuff is a little bit tricky. Like, there were some just wide open targets that he was able to capitalize on, but you see him win off the line consistently. He is so smooth off the line of scrimmage. He's also physical. He's very aware and has a good feel for when guys are trying to jam him and get him off his mark. And he doesn't really get pressed. That makes up for the lack of great vertical speed, because he's going to win off the line and win quickly. He can win on slants. Reminds me a lot of T. Higgins after the catch, in the way that he just gets the ball very quickly, tucks it away, and then immediately looks upfield to try to get more yards, fights for extra yards, is physical after the catch. Like, very much a T. Higgins light in my eyes. And then on top of it, he's tough as a run blocker, which you really love, kind of a tone setter. He was a team captain. And then he could have transferred. I believe there was a head coaching change after he had committed, or when he was already there for a year, one or the other, and he actually stayed. Yeah. And when the coach talked about him in an interview, like, he cried. This is a guy that is very highly regarded when it comes to that football program over at Illinois. So I just think if you're talking like a fourth round receiver where you're kind of throwing a dart at a guy that's a good part of your program, will contribute on special teams, and also could fit a need that you have, I really like Pat Bryant. And then another guy that I'm intrigued by and is becoming one of my like mid-round darlings is Jalen Royals, because size-wise, he's perfect for what Elliott Wolf looks for. He's 6 foot, 205 pounds, was first team All Mountain West. Strengths, looking at friend of the channel Daniel Harm's profile on him, route running, stem manipulation, acceleration, yards after the catch. These are all things that Mike Vrabel said he really wanted. Now, one thing there that doesn't stand out is the catch radius part. I know he's really big on that, but getting after it when you actually have the ball in your hand and also being able to get open are really good strengths of his. Some concerns are physicality through the route, release variety, press comfort. So may need to be more of a Z early on, but he feels like he has the kind of skill set, probably going to be a day 2 player that could be a good value in a class where it feels like it's very middle heavy. There's not a whole lot of guys at the top that you're really excited about. So if he kind of slips and they've got a lot of their needs already filled in the trenches, Jalen Royals is a guy that I'm pretty intrigued by.
Yeah, that's another guy that we talk about. Can you find McDaniels the next Edelman, Welker, right? That sort of guy. And can he be a high volume target? He has the size for it. I think he has the reliability for it, his ability to create after the catch, because that's not a guy you're going to be sending vertically a ton. So he's going to need to, and when I say that guy, I mean that role, right, is not a player you're going to be sending vertically a ton. So can he create with the ball in his hands? He's certainly on the list for players in that spot. You know, it's kind of becoming clear. You're starting to see whether it's Jalen Royals, Xavier Restrepo, Emeka Egbuka's at the top of this list. Even Nick Nash, who's in the Shrine Bowl. I don't know why I did this before I did the Senior Bowl preview with you. I'm working on my Shrine Bowl preview right now for 98.5thesportshub.com.
Nice.
So I have all those names stuck in my head. We can touch on that a little bit at the end if you want. But yeah, you're starting to kind of see those names, hear those names a lot. That are, potential slots in a Josh McDaniels offense.
That's exciting. Also, real quick, Ladd McConkey is not an X for the Chargers. FYI, I was right. I was wrong about him not really being a Z. That was where I did kind of screw up, but that's okay. I will.
Well, that offense, Z and slot are kind of the same thing. There's a lot of overlap.
Fair enough. He's like a Julian Edelman kind of Z, where it's like he's not actually a Z. It's more like they move him around so that he's never actually getting touched. But it's okay. I'll accept responsibility, and I will sit in my shame while you hear from our good friends over at Prize Picks. Be right back.
Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all, and all you have to do is pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks, and the big game in the NFL is almost here, which means it's now or never. Don't miss out on the last football game of the season with Prize Picks, the best place to win cash while watching the game. Prize Picks is also giving away a free pick for the big game, where one of the starting quarterbacks will only need to throw for 1 yard to win. And if you're correct on at least one more stat projection, you will win real cash. So sign up today on the Prize Picks app. You'll get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. So make sure you sign up today, download the app, and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game.
All right, buddy, let's get into the trenches. Start off on the offensive side of the ball. Who do you think, whether it's a left tackle, whether it's a right tackle? Patriots did choose Caden Wallace in the 3rd round last year, but he barely played as a rookie, so we have no idea how this new regime is going to feel about him. Who do you think could be a potential fit for the Patriots that you're going to be looking out for next week?
There's really 2 guys you're looking for in this game specifically. If you're trying to find that starting left tackle late on day 1, early on day 2, and it's Josh Connolly and it's Ariante Ursary.
Yes, sir.
And those are the guys that are in the mix. You might end up having to trade back into the 1st round for either. I think that would be worth it if you end up getting a starting left tackle, but that's the main event. That might be the main event of this whole game, is which one of those 2 is the guy. Which one of those 2 after Campbell, after Banks is that next tackle. So that's what that's going to be fascinating. That's going to be one of the big takeaways coming away from the week. I like Marcus Mbotu. He's a right tackle, but like you said, I wouldn't rule out them maybe bringing in somebody comparable. I don't think they're going to go up high and invest in a right tackle, but Wallace was a 3rd round pick. You bring in another 3rd, 4th round pick, and you hope between the 2 of them you have a starter. Maybe Mbo is that guy. So I wouldn't rule that out either, but it's Ursary, it's Connerly. That's what you want to see. I'll tell you the guys I'm less interested in, and I've seen these names out there. Wyatt Milam from West Virginia. And then
is he a tackle? Because I keep seeing that he's a guard.
So you're jumping, you're getting ahead of me here. Good job. And Gray Zabel from North Dakota State. Those 2 guys I've seen a lot. People trying to find like that day 2 tackle. Those are guards. Milam might be a center. Now, he's be a hell of a center, but he might be a center. So stop wedging those guys in your mock drafts at 38, thinking you got a tackle because you didn't. Also, I'm looking at the list. I missed this guy before when I was doing my prep, and I know you like this guy, Taylor. So tell me if I'm stealing your thunder. Cut me off here. Anthony Belton.
I do like him, but he wasn't on my list, so go ahead.
So I'm generally anti-switching tackles, like switching sides. I can stomach left to right more than right to left.
Yeah.
And I look at Anthony Belton and I see a Josh McDaniels right tackle. Like
Yeah,
that guy
agree.
is so what they want in that role, that if he slips a little bit, that is one of the rare instances where I look at it and I'm like, because the thing is, you can start the season with Caden Wallace. If you draft Belton knowing he's going to play right, and you get him developing on the right side, starting in OTAs, you can start the season with Caden Wallace if he's not ready. And if it works with Caden Wallace, great. Now you have a swing tackle backup, a guy that can play on both sides. And I also think he might have the upside that if it's not going great with Caden Wallace, I would try him on the right side. So I'll be interested to see if he plays on the right side this week at practice or in the game. That'd be very telling. I wouldn't be surprised if he does, just given his makeup. I don't think the Patriots alone would view him as a potential right tackle. That might be a handful of teams. So I'm really interested to see what he did. I somehow missed him when I was going through the invites list, but that guy is high on my watch list too.
It's ironic you missed him because this dude is massive. He's like,
it's not, if it was pictures, I wouldn't
pounds.
have missed him, but it's just the list. So
yeah, no, he's freaking huge. So, all right. So mine, those are excellent names. Those are guys I had on my list as well. Somebody I'm going to be looking for, Ozzie Trapillo out of Boston College. One, that is a pipeline that I'm sure is going to get established at some point. Bill O'Brien, Mike Vrabel, just makes all the sense in the world. Another reason why it feels like nature is healing is now we once again have a Patriots head coach who's actually friends with the head coach over at BC. You know, it's just like everything is kind of coming together this year. Not going to go too deep in the weeds on that. But Trapillo's interesting, one, not just because he's a local guy and because his dad actually protected Doug Flutie back in the day at BC, but I like the versatility. He's played everything except for center. He's got size. He's got length. He's 6'7", 314 pounds. That sounds like a Josh McDaniels left tackle. He's also got good feet, a good anchor. Now, the issue is he's not a great athlete. That's where the comparisons for a Josh McDaniels left tackle, those kind of end. Also, redirection's a bit of an issue for him. And then he can get beat by counters to the inside. That's an issue with, I feel like, every offensive tackle that's not going in like the first round early on. I believe he's more of like a day 3 kind of guy, but if they just want to dart throw at a guy who can just be a super sub, maybe you develop him well enough he can actually be a solid starter for you somewhere. Also really like the play style. He's a physical dude, so that's a pretty interesting kind of developmental option. Another is Jalen Travis out of Iowa State, 6'7", 340 pounds, got great size, pretty good hands, really good run blocker, and he's got good feet. Obviously, very developmental prospect. Another probably day 2 guy, might actually go higher than Ozzie Trapillo. But I like the size profile. I like the physicality. Once again, that's kind of where I'm at with these late round guys. It's like, give me versatility. That's why I like Mbo as well. If they just want somebody who can start somewhere, if they don't get the Patrick McCarry, you know, my whole thing is like left guard, right tackle. We don't know where they're going to have a need. Maybe get somebody who can do a little bit of everything. So that's kind of where I'm looking. I like guys who've got some attitude, want to play with violence, like they're going to be doing on the defensive side, and obviously can line up in a bunch of places and are very smart players.
I'll give you one more while we're on the line too, before we move over. Center is potentially a need, depending on how they feel about Cole Strange. I would love to get that next guy, and I know Jake Andrews as well, but we don't know where he's at coming off that injury. Ben Brown's a nice player, but I think he's a backup, replacement level starter. Yeah. Trying to get somebody in to develop to take over for David Andrews as he's year to year. And David Andrews was an undersized center coming out of Georgia. How about another undersized center coming out of Georgia? Jared Wilson is going to be at this game. Doesn't have a ton of starting experience, only 1 year as a starter, 1 full year as a starter. So he's a little raw in that regard. But again, you're drafting him ideally with a year of runway before he's going to take over and he can learn from David Andrews. Really smart player. I love his motor. He's always looking for work. Good agility for that position. Like he's a center who you can kind of move around a little bit, can pull and help. I don't know that he's like, I'm not telling you he's going to be David Andrews and be the starter here for 15 years, but if you're looking for guys on day 3, especially later on day 3 to take a shot on and be like, hey, this guy, give me your develop and see what happens. I like the tools that Jared Wilson is working with.
Any chance he ends up being a priority UDFA?
No, he's gonna get drafted. I'd be pretty surprised if he doesn't get drafted.
So what are the biggest differences between him and DA? Because I didn't remember what the hype was like for Andrews coming out of college.
Andrews was UDFA, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was undrafted.
I mean, he was undersized. He was, he was experienced. I think he was a multi-year starter at Georgia. This is just kind of, there's a lot of experienced centers in this draft. There's a lot of guys who are, 3-4 year starters. So it's kind of like with the wide receivers last year, where you had really good receivers who were day 2 picks because, all right, player B is as good as player A, but player A, we have 3 years of tape on. Player B, we only have 1 year of tape on. So, I think if Jared Wilson had played at this level for 2 or 3 years, it's center. So he's not going to go that high, but you're talking about a guy who's, maybe pushing the back end of day 2. Now he's like an early to mid day 3 guy just because he's a little bit more of an unknown.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to stick to the trenches. Actually, we'll talk about it backstage, whether we want to go edge, whether we want to go defensive interior. Maybe tell us in the comments while you watch this ad from our friends over at Game Time. Be right back.
This episode is also powered by Game Time, the best place to get tickets to anything, concerts, games, and more. They have the Game Time Picks feature that makes getting tickets even easier. It filters out the fluff and only shows you incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets to find the best value. They also have the lowest price guarantee, and they have seat views to check out exactly what it's going to look like from your seat. So make sure you download the Game Time app today to take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Download the app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
Alex, what time is it?
Game time.
Damn right, it's game time. It is also time to move on to the defensive interior. As soon as I find that graphic, there it is. So who are some inside guys that you like? Because I know we talked about this yesterday, and some don't think that defensive tackle is a need for this team or that it's not a premium position. I personally disagree. I think that pass rusher, period, is a premium position. I think if you can do that from the inside while being an every down player, I think that you have an advantage that's greater than any really in football, because it's almost impossible to stop a dominant defensive tackle. And when you actually look at the Patriots, they're very top heavy without really any developmental depth outside of Jaquelin Roy, who only has 1 more season on his deal. You got Christian Barmore. We have no idea what his status is. History of knee issues. You've also got the blood clots. Huge mystery there. And then Devon Godshaw, he's going to be a free agent after 2025. And on top of that, he's also exclusively a run stopper. Patriots are going to be playing more 4-down fronts consistently. It's kind of tough to justify not having guys who can get after the passer. So I really do think that's going to be a position that they end up having to address at some point in the draft and in free agency. So who are some guys that stand out to you to potentially fill some of these gaps, especially in terms of developmental pieces?
Yeah, look, I think it's a need. I don't know that I would address it at 4 unless we find out Barmore's not playing anymore, but I do think it's a need, both in terms of pass rushers and run stoppers. But Taylor, there's one guy I got to go to here when we're talking about this, and that is Deon Walker from Kentucky. Big number 0. So you guys know, like, I get all hot and bothered with the oversized athletic defensive tackles. Like Jordan Davis might be a top 3 draft prospect I've ever studied. And Deon Walker's he's not Jordan Davis. Like, I'm not going there, but 6'6", 350, and he gets after the quarterback. He is so athletic for his size. He plays the game. He plays the game violently. You put him next to Christian Barmore, and you're really cooking with gas here. I also think he's a player that, while he's not the best run defender right now, can probably grow into a serviceable run stopper. He's not going to be Vince Wilfork, but I think he, you'd still want to have that Devon Godshaw, that nose tackle on your roster. But if you need some help in a pinch, I think he can be a guy that can contribute there. He had a rough year this year. He was projected to be like a top 20 pick. He had a rough year. I know there's some questions maybe about his buy-in, his commitment, but the talent's undeniable. And if he interviews well, right, if he clears the interview, I think he's a guy worth taking at 38. They need to beef up the trenches. He's a guy that can do that. He can be a real chess piece. And for everybody talking about Mason Graham, and I get it, Mason Graham's an unbelievable player. He's an elite prospect. Mason Graham or, whoever, Will Campbell plus an extra top 50 pick, and you still end up with Deon Walker, that package as a whole is probably better.
Yes.
So if you're somebody who is really into the idea of Mason Graham because you think that's a major need, I think you can get a hell of an impact from Deion Walker and end up with more in a trade down. So I really like him. The other guy I'd mentioned is Ty Robinson from Nebraska. Physical player, mean player, comes with some of those intangible leadership qualities. He's probably a hybrid tackle end, which is also kind of intriguing. Little bit of Lawrence Guy-ish, where you can play him on the inside on early downs, and then play him on the inside on passing downs. Early downs, he's probably more of an end run stopper. I think
like a Dietrich Wise type, you mean?
Yeah, he's bigger. He's like 6'6", 310. So he's more stout.
Oh, geez. Okay.
Yeah,
he doesn't look like he's 310. I thought he was like 290-ish.
He's listed at 310. We'll see.
Oh, okay,
you might be right. But I think he's a guy that, can be a 3-4 end, can be a 4-3 tackle. And it's just going to give you, he's not a guy that, what's the best way to put it? Like, he's not a guy that you're going to move easily. He's not the most attacking player. Like Deion Walker is an attacking player. Ty Robinson is more, he's going to make the plays that are there to be made, which isn't, I know it's not the most exciting, but he's a projected day 3 pick. And how many plays were there to be made up front last year that they didn't make? So just getting a guy like that, I would almost say, like, how I like to tier the guys, right? So you have Mason Graham as day 1, Deion Walker is kind of day 2 Mason Graham. Ty Robinson would be more like a day 3 Jack Sawyer to me. He's not quite as explosive as Sawyer. He's not quite as athletic, but he's going to be a physical force. He's going to be somebody that offenses have to account for.
That is a really interesting one there. Ty Robinson, he just feels like a very I think it's somebody saying in the comments, and I was really glad that you actually brought him up. And then with Deion Walker, we're on the same page there.
Yeah.
With Mason Graham, if they're stuck at 4, I'm very okay if they end up taking Graham, because I do think he's going to end up being like the most dominant player in that top group, assuming that like Travis Hunter's gone, Abdul Carter's gone, and we're living in that world. If they trade down, I'm all fine with that, because I do think there's so many, especially in the top 100, even if you can get another like top 120 pick and the top 100 pick, I think that's where you can get some really, really good value in those rounds, pretty much like every year. My list, I've got Walter Nolan. He's a very interesting prospect for me. He was former 5-star recruit, has no major injuries throughout his career. And looking at all the profiles on him, a lot of these, like, I haven't had time to watch a ton of these guys as much as I want to. So a lot of what I have is on profiles. That's what makes it even more fun, actually being at the Senior Bowl, because I'll get to watch them. You get a lot of first impressions, like face to face. But on Bleacher Report, the overall they have on him, all the tools to be a starter within his first 2 years in the NFL, and he has Pro Bowl and All-Pro potential down the line. Schematically, he's versatile as someone who can line up as a 3 technique in even fronts or play as a 4-eye technique in odd fronts. Now, again, this may not be a glaring area of need, this specific role, if Christian Barmore does end up returning. But if he doesn't, and you don't get a Milton Williams, again, having those disruptive presences, especially in the middle, it's just, if it's an edge rusher, it's a little bit easier to block those guys. You can chip them. You can do all that. The middle, it's tough. You can assign to help, but then if it's an obvious pass rush situation and you just say, all right, we're putting 6 guys on the line, everyone's got a one-on-one matchup, then you're in a really tough spot as a quarterback. So I really like his profile. Also, Joshua Farmer, interior guy out of Florida State, 2nd-team All-ACC, 6'3", 318 pounds. He's powerful. He's quick. He can work in gaps, got good hands, and he's versatile. He can move around. Now, pad level, conditioning, anchor are the issues. But both with Farmer and with Walker, the biggest benefit and the thing that gets me excited is you have Terrell Williams now. I feel like defensive line is one of the positions where most commonly it's like, you just need somebody to get all this potential out of him, and then he's really going to explode. Because a lot of the time, you're like taking shots as a defensive lineman. If you don't want to play the run, it just is very glaringly obvious if you're just out there to get after the passer. So sometimes these guys need a mentor to kind of just set them along the right path, kind of change their mentality while also getting the most out of them physically. Everything we've heard about Terrell Williams is he's a fantastic teacher, a great mentor, on top of being, as Mike Vrabel described him, and Dan Campbell, the best defensive line coach in the NFL. So those projects become much more appealing, and you hope you can get more like Christian Barmore's, where there were struggles early on, but he finally kind of clicked, and then he became this just game-wrecking presence that we were hoping he would be.
Well, along those lines, Taylor, then, we're still at Ole Miss here, and I'm working on this name. I will have it down by the time I get to the Combine. Princely, you know who I'm talking about?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Umanilian, I think it is. Umanilian. More of a linebacker, outside linebacker, but like he's a pass rusher, and right now he's just winning on like length and athleticism. the tools are there for him to be a much more diverse pass rusher. And that's why he's a projected day 2 pick instead of first round pick. Cause I think he has the athleticism. I think he has the explosiveness to be up there with, Abdul Carter's in his own tier, but to be up there with a guy like a Michael Williams or a James Pierce, but he's just not as developed as those guys. But, I'm sure Troy Williams will work with some linebackers as well. And maybe he can kind of get that. Another guy that, how'd you phrase it? You just need to get the potential out of him.
Yeah. Just like sometimes you just got to make sure you get that mentality shift where they really get the buy-in, and then you just teach them fundamentally how to be the best versions of themselves. Then it's like, oh, wait, defending the run can be fun when you're jacking guys up and you're pushing somebody like 2 feet behind the line of scrimmage and making tackles for loss. Like, yeah, then it's not as much fun as sacking a quarterback, but it's also pretty fun. And sometimes these guys just need to kind of get their head on straight so they're willing to do everything it takes to succeed in the NFL consistently.
Right.
Okay, so while we're already on the topic of edge rushers, let's keep going. Who are some guys that you're going to be looking at? Actually, I'm going to start off with a name that I want you to tell me about. Mike Green. I've been seeing his name a lot on Twitter. All the profiles I've read are like, no, this dude's an absolute menace. But he doesn't get talked about because he's out of Marshall. So is this a guy that you think is going to end up sneaking up into the top of the draft? And how high do you think he might end up going?
Yeah, so he reminds me a little bit just in terms of prospect makeup, not necessarily a similar player, but remember Muhammad Kamara last year?
Yeah.
Who I really liked. And he's one of these guys who was incredibly, incredibly productive in the group of 5. And there's some traits there you like, but when you look at the physical traits specifically, it's always kind of tough to tell, okay, well, he's not going against these NFL caliber prospects game in and game out. And so how do you really measure it up? Mike Green's like that, kind of different than Kamara in the sense that Kamara was like this big, stocky guy. He wasn't tall, but he was like this thick, stocky guy. And it was, is he going to be able to overpower NFL edge rushers? Mike Green's the other way where he's just, he's a speed rusher, but he's kind of undersized. And is he just going to get pushed around? Watching him going up against a guy like Anthony Belton is going to be fascinating. Who has those long arms and can he just kind of knock him off the spot? So for a guy like Mike Green, this is a huge week for him. He needs to prove that he can hang with these Power 5 top tier kinds of prospects because you like what you see on tape, but the nature of his position, the nature in which he wins, sometimes these guys translate, sometimes they don't. And you don't really know until you actually get to see it in action. So he's got to have a big week this week.
And this is one of the more exciting positions, I think, at the Senior Bowl, because there's a lot of good players at these edge spots. They've all got some deficiencies and things.
It's a really good edge draft, Taylor. Everybody yelling about the draft sucking. Like some positions, yes. Let's talk about some good ones too. And edge or running back is the best position in this draft.
So that's kind of why I wanted to close out with this one. We're going to talk about one more position, but this is like the last one we're really going to go in depth. Honestly, man, go nuts. Who are some names that you're excited about? Because there's a lot of them, and I don't want to leave any out if we don't have to.
I kind of want to talk about, I'm not even going to try again, the guy from Ole Miss. But the other one, because I think there's a real chance he's a Patriot, and that's Kyle Kennard.
Yeah.
Because, he's got all the tool. Like he looks like a Patriots pass rusher when you watch him. He's he's diverse stylistically. He's got good size. He's got good burst. He's disciplined. So many of these guys now that are great pass rushers, I think kind of know it. And so they get a little wild.
Yep.
He's not really, Kennard's not, Kennard seems, he's not the most disciplined pass rusher I've ever seen, but I think he's a little wise beyond his years in that regard. Now, he's probably only a pass rusher, and that's the downside with a lot of the rushers in this draft. There's not a lot of 3-down edge guys, which, teams are going to ask themselves some tough questions. James Pierce, and he's not at the Senior Bowl, but he's a fascinating player to talk about in this regard, and his value is going to kind of set the value for the rest of these guys. James Pierce, a hell of a pass rusher.
Yeah.
That's probably all he is. He's not going to be a guy, at least early in his career, the first few years, who plays on 3 downs. Generally, if you're going to go in the top 15 as either a defensive lineman or an outside linebacker, you have to be able to play all 3 downs. Now, maybe you're a better pass rusher than run stopper, but you need to at least be able to be out there. And the question this year is James Pierce a good enough pass rusher to justify in a weak draft kind of breaking that mold or not? Because if he is, he's going to go in the top 10. And then that pushes some of these other guys up the board. If teams just kind of start deciding, you know what, it's just not the year. We're just not going to take these pass rushers and reach. Well, now James Pierce maybe falls closer to the 20s. And now you have a guy like Kyle Kennard, who's a fringe first-round pick, who's maybe in play in the 40s, and it's going to stack all that. But just looking at where the Patriots are picking, kind of the early projections, I really like Kyle Kennard for the Patriots. I know you're big on Devin. Ezeraku, right?
Donovan Ezeraku, yeah.
Donovan Ezeraku. So I'll let you talk about him, but I like Kennard.
So with Ezeraku, the reason that he kind of intrigues me, one, again, the BC connection is very obvious, but he's the mold that we talked about, where it was like, okay, if you get like a Josh Sweat, where he's not just a situational pass rusher, you can play him on every down, although his strength is pass rushing. That allows you to wait a little bit for the edge rusher. You don't have to get an Abdul Carter. Obviously, you'd like to. But then it's like, all right, if we get a guy where he's really going to be a pass rusher, he could probably do other things. We're just going to take some time to develop him. That'll be fine. And that feels like Ezeraku, where he can immediately give you a lot of juice off the edge. He is undersized, but one thing that made me feel even better about this was Terrell Williams being like, hey, I've had success with undersized guys before. The biggest example, Cameron Wake, when he was in Miami, but he's worked with all different types of shapes and sizes. So the undersized part of it doesn't really worry me too much. Also, hadn't had any major injuries. He's the ACC Defensive Player of the Year, first team All ACC. So he intrigues me as more of like a third round kind of guy. Also, Josiah Stewart. I really like him as well. Another undersized edge rusher. But he fits what I think is going to be a better mold for this style of 4-down defense, where Jelani Tavai, his value is as an adjuster, where he can be your inside linebacker as the will in the 4-down fronts, but then when you want to go 5-down, he can be the strong side linebacker and also set the edge in the run game and kind of be that sort of guy. I think that what they're going to value more, because if you have 4-down linemen, those edge guys have to be able to rush the passer. They can't just be run stoppers. Tavai gives you no pass rush. Instead, you'd want guys like Carter, like Jahad Campbell, like Stewart, who can play inside linebacker, but also get down on the line of scrimmage and rush the passer a la like a Dante Hightower type, although Dante Hightower is obviously in his own vein. So with Stewart, I think you get a similar kind of thing where he can rush the passer, can also play on early downs for you, give you more of that coverage type linebacker. So I like the versatility, and I'm just kind of obsessed right now with that mold of guys who can play on and off the ball, giving you real juice getting after the passer.
So have you done any work on Jalen Walker yet from Georgia?
Not yet, no.
So that's the guy in this draft,
okay.
The player you're describing. The comp for him has actually been Gerard Mayo. But that's
which is weird if he's versatile like that, because Mayo never really played on the line.
Early career Mayo.
Oh, okay. I didn't watch early career Mayo.
He didn't do it a ton, but he did a little bit.
Okay.
But Jalen Walker, now it's the Georgia defense, so it's kind of tough to project roles because it's so unique the way they scheme it up. But he's not Senior Bowl, so we don't need to go a ton into him. But the guy you're describing, that's kind of the top of that tree. If you want,
when is he going to go?
Probably early teens. So I don't know how realistic he is for the Patriots unless they're moving way down. But it still helps to know, because now you kind of look at, okay, how big are the gaps between these similar players, and that's how you figure out where you want to get each player. How you kind of want to value different players throughout the draft.
It's a great point. And you know who Bleacher Report compared him to?
Oh, Dante
Pro
Hightower.
Bowler Kyle Van Noy.
Oh, yeah, that's another good one.
Literally is what you're looking for. That's exactly what you want.
So he's just a Patriots linebacker.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, I'm definitely going to dive into him. All right, buddy. I know you wanted to talk about tight ends. I haven't really done a ton of work into them, so this is going to be your segment. Fire away, because this is definitely another need. I just don't think it's quite as high, because you're probably re-signing Austin Hooper. You're probably re-signing Hunter Henry. So really, this is going to be a developmental guy. But with Jaheim Bell, late round pick, didn't really do much as a rookie, even though he did get time. I'm all for the Patriots going for somebody they think can develop into like a Y or a movable kind of player.
I think it's important because tight end generally has one of the longer developmental timelines in the NFL. Like even the best tight end, Brock Bowers, is such an anomaly. Not just the season he had, but for a rookie tight end to be that impactful. A lot of great tight ends, it took them 2 to 3 years to get going. So, Hunter Henry's entering his age 30 season. I wouldn't be surprised if Hooper maybe goes try to chase some tight end 1 money somewhere. He might get that, or even still, he's a little older. He's going to be year to year.
30. Yeah.
I'd rather get that next guy in the building sooner rather than later and have him kind of learn for a year or two so he can hit the ground running. There's a couple guys in this game that I like for the Patriots. Gunnar Helm from Texas had a really strong season. Mason Taylor from LSU is like in terms of developmental timeline, he's further along than most tight ends. But the guy I specifically wanted to talk about is Harold Fannin, because I've been getting a lot of questions about him. Kind of like we talked about with Mike Green earlier. Yeah, so Bowling Green. Harold Fannin dominated the MAC. Dominated. He was the first unanimous consensus or unanimous All-American from Bowling Green.
Oh, my God.
But he's another one of these guys where I love the tools. How do they play against tougher competition? And we talked about how good some of these linebackers are in this game. It's a good safety group, too, at the Senior Bowl. Like, this is going to be – some people think Harold Fannin could push the end of the first round. I don't know that I'd go that far, but, you know, this could be the difference between Harold Fannin sneaking into the top 40 and maybe still being on the board at the beginning of at the beginning of round 3. I don't think he's falling out of top 100, but he's going to be he's another one of these guys that you look at this week. And I always like to say at the end of the day, we're evaluating these guys based on who they're like, their ability to play football. And we just saw that for 4 months, 11 on 11, full pads, full contact, all of that. That should be the majority of the evaluation. We get caught up in the Senior Bowl. We get caught up in the combine. But at the end of the day, that's more about confirming priors. And again, when you have two players who grade out, or 2 or 3 players or a group of players who grade out very similarly, it's more of a tiebreaker. You shouldn't be forming your overall opinion on a player based on the Senior Bowl. But it does hold more weight for some than others. Fannin's a guy, Quinion Mitchell was a great example of this last year. He was another MAC guy that was playing at a high level, and he came and people were like, all right, like, let's see it. And he dominated the Senior Bowl, and that translated. So for Harold Fannin, it's a similar thing where shouldn't make or break your evaluation of him, but I think this game holds more for him than it does for some other players, especially those coming from Power 4 schools.
So are there any other players at any other positions that you're going to be looking forward to? That's why we're going to close this out, because obviously there are positions of need, but the Patriots have needs almost everywhere except for probably quarterbacks. So there's also a chance maybe in the later rounds, there are some guys that are going to be on the board that they may want to take best player available.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple here, just scrolling through the positions. At running back, I know everybody is excited to watch Scadaboo. I believe he's there, but the name I'll give you is Ollie Gordon. Ollie Gordon was supposed to be the top back in this class, and he dominant year at Oklahoma State in 2023. And then everybody kind of realized, hey, if we stack the box against Oklahoma State, they can't do anything else. And they never tried. So you had Ollie Gordon running into like 8 and 9 man boxes, and then he got hurt, and it was just like, it was not a good year. He was not a good situation. It was not a good year. Meanwhile, you had all these other running backs that soared up the board, and now Ollie Gordon's kind of gotten lost in the wash. But so I think under Josh McDaniels, they're going to go back to that early down, passing down back dynamic, more so than splitting just by drives. So if you're looking for that early down back, 6'2", 225, breakaway speed, good power, like this is a guy that he has the makeup. He just had a bad year in 2024. If you go and watch the tape in 2023, he's a top 100 pick. If you go and watch the tape this past year, he's not. So him proving that he's still that guy he was in 2023 could go a long way, and he certainly fits the bill of a Mike Vrabel kind of running back, a Josh McDaniels kind of running back. So that's exciting.
Especially in the Patriots offense, real quick, especially in the version of the Patriots offense where it's not like with Mac Jones and with Cam Newton where everyone was loading up the box. Last year, what we were seeing was defenses saying, oh, no, we're not letting Drake May go bombs away on us. So they were playing a lot of too high. They just couldn't capitalize on it consistently. So that makes him a much more exciting potential. What are you thinking? Like 5th round kind of guy, late 4th or?
Yeah, 4th, 5th, somewhere in there. His timing at the combine is probably going to be big. And I know I just said, like, don't let the combine dictate, but again, it's that tiebreaker.
Right.
It's such a competitive running back class. There's a lot of room for him to move. I don't think he makes it into the top 100 at this point, but I think the Patriots could benefit off that. I'll give you a couple safeties too, because you didn't really talk about that. That's a need for the Patriots, especially. I would love to see them get a true free safety again. Andrew Makuba from Texas is a player that I love. Super instinctive safety, great ball skills, can cover a lot of ground. He has the ability to play on the back end like that. Lathan Ransom and Xavier Watts, we both saw in the national championship, Ohio State and Notre Dame respectively. kind of similar players. Watts is probably a little bit better. Played primarily free safety in college. They're going to be hybrid guys in the NFL. I want to see them get that true free safety, but if they stick to the mold they've been doing, Watts especially is a total Patriots fit. And then one other guy I'll give you that is relevant for Patriots fans to watch is Will Howard. And I don't think the Patriots are going to draft Will Howard, but we've talked about this off the air. We might have talked about it on the air. Does Will Howard have that J.J. McCarthy kind of rise where he's built like an NFL quarterback? He just led a power team to a national championship. He does have a big arm. Do scouts just kind of see that? And, more or do owners see that? And more than evaluating the football player, look and say, that's the kind of guy I could see as the face of my franchise. And does he move up into the first round conversation? Because now that if there's another first round quarterback, I'll throw Jalen Milroe in here too, because he's going to the game. But one, I don't know how involved he's going to be. I don't know how involved Howard's going to be either. But Howard is just kind of has this run off the national championship. He has this momentum. Another quarterback in the first round, especially if it's in the top 10, changes the value of the 4th overall pick if you're trying to move down.
And Will Howard, just from watching him on the sideline, interacting with teammates and everything, I feel like he's going to kill it in interviews.
Oh,
yeah.
I
think that he's going to be very well liked. I remember last year at the Senior Bowl seeing Joe Milton. Like, that was when he really came on my radar, where I'm like, he feels like he's in charge. He feels like really almost like a coach on the field, just the body language, the way he was interacting with people. And Will Howard, I was like, oh, no, this is a dude who, if people like his physical profile, then that's probably going to be okay, I actually want to get this kid. And maybe, like you said, make him the face of the franchise. That's going to be very interesting. But buddy, we're almost at the hour mark. I'm going to let you go. Thank you for coming on the show. We got to do more of these as the draft season obviously continues, but we have a lot of stuff going on before then. But before I let you go, please remind the people where they can find you and let us know what good stuff you got coming down the pipeline that we need to be looking out for.
Yeah, 98.5thesportshub.com. I will have a Shrine Bowl preview up tomorrow because the practices start tomorrow, so that'll be up early tomorrow. And then Senior Bowl preview probably Monday.
Awesome.
I usually like to wait. So we didn't talk about this a ton, but it is kind of part of the Senior Bowl prep to me. So they have the list of accepted invites. They haven't, at least not publicly, split them into rosters yet. And that, I try to wait for that to write my preview because, don't you want to see Devin Ezeraku against Arion Harris or whatever, right? Like, who's going to?
That's way cooler.
It's the guys on the same team that are mainly facing each other because it's 3 days of practice versus 1 day of the game. So I'm holding out as long as I can to write it so I can hopefully include that, but we'll see.
Hoping they help you out because honestly, now I'm looking forward to it. So fingers crossed. Oh, you keep those dang fingers and toes crossed, but gonna let you go, buddy. Thank you so much once again for coming on. And thank you all as always for watching. Now take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. We will see you next time. Peace, y'all.
Bye.